Hey guys, today I'm joined by Alan from R4. R4 is a company helping enterprise retailers and operators use AI and analytics to achieve better commercial decisions across inventory, allocation, markdowns, store performance, and expansion planning. We've been working together over the past few months together on a podcast led executive access pilot designed to open up the first conversation with senior retail executives, uh, capture useful buyer language, and really create business development momentum beyond just actual podcast content. In this conversation, I really want to examine this case study with what we did with R4, uh, specifically what pipeline problem we were trying to solve, and kind of like what friction points and what was misunderstood in the strategy before, and really what the main takeaways were from the pilot and what we learned from producing the first executive conversations. Um, Alan, welcome.
Thanks. Good to be here, Myra.
So, can you just share for somebody who doesn't know what R4 does, what do you guys do, and who do you guys serve?
So we're an enterprise software company in artificial intelligence. We serve the largest retailers and consumer manufacturers you can think of, along with national defense and state and local services as well.
Sure. What growth or pipeline problem were you trying to solve before this pilot?
So we're a young company, and we're fighting with giants. We're in the AI space, which is very crowded, with lots of very well capitalized competitors that have been around longer than we have. So we have to punch above our weight. The market is extremely crowded, so we also have to stand out. And we were using traditional demand generation methodologies, sending lots of email, going after LinkedIn profiles, doing everything we could in that traditional sense. But it's really just putting us in the ring with people that have more money to spend on those activities than we do. So we were looking for something unique and creative that would set us apart. And that's when we came across you guys and was very attracted to the value proposition and the whole idea of finding people through a channel that not everybody else was crowding into at the same time.
What do you feel kind of didn't work about your approach before finding kind of like a better way to engage that first conversation?
It really is. I think of it as AI fatigue in an AI crowded market. So all of our customers get pitched by AI companies a dozen times a week or more. And the second you say I'm an artificial intelligence, their mind kind of goes blank, like, oh, geez, another one. And it you really have to go even more above the threshold of traffic and
And
ambient
ambient.
noise to get noticed.
For sure. I know that when you started evaluating this, there wasn't any experience or certainty in the podcast led approach. What skepticism did you had before we started?
When I first heard about it, yeah, I'm not a podcast guy, so so I was interested in learning about it, but B, I didn't really have a sense for how people would be attracted to it. I haven't experienced a lot of podcasts before, but the whole idea and the thinking that there is a segment of my customer out there who are very social media oriented and think about podcasts all the time. And the thought of appealing to that part of their nature in a way that kind of disarmed them, didn't make them so defensive when we first approached them, was an interesting value proposition to me. So, and I think what finally sold me was I was always skeptical until you suggested one day, why don't I do a podcast with you? And I walked through it with you. Just kind of experienced the ease of walking through a podcast, the ease of editing it. It became a lot less unknown and intimidating to think about taking this on as a demand generation tactic.
Yeah, yeah. And I remember that you were specifically hesitant to host these conversations. I know it's not specifically your forte. You don't again, like you don't see yourself engaging in it, so you didn't really see yourself kind of able to to host these conversations. What do you feel uh you learned in that regard?
It was just, again, the experience of watching somebody who does this for a living, you, Mayor, kind of how easily you facilitated the discussion, how natural the conversation felt. And after experiencing with you, I felt like it's something I could do with a little bit of training and a little bit of practice. And turns out that was the case.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. So let's shift back again to the pipeline that we were able to create. Once we started the campaigns, what types of people did you see were actually willing to engage, and like and what was significant about that?
Think everybody we recruited was interested in engaging. I didn't have a podcast where people just were reticent to talk about their jobs and their roles and what they do. I think that was the interesting. It's a self-selecting thing. I'm sure that when you talk to somebody of would you like us to work with you in a podcast, they're going to self-select into it. Although there was one that was very interesting. She explicitly said, I've never done this before, and my entire team is waiting to see this podcast because they could not believe I actually signed up to do a podcast. So there's a, especially for workers that aren't familiar with this, maybe a little bit toward the end of their careers, and this is a new technical innovation for them. It surprises their peers and subordinates when they all of a sudden show up with a podcast done.
Yeah, yeah, and I think again, you said yourself like you felt like this was a different approach. What do you feel about the podcast invitation? How is it different than like the types of conversations that normal cold outbound would have created?
Well, I think you called it right when you first described this. It's about a value exchange. And when people are getting pitched all the time, it feels like it's a one-way street. I am being asked to give value to you, where this is completely the opposite. It is, we think you would enjoy and and profit from having some unique social media assets that you can post yourself. And so we spoke to their personal interest and something that was personally of value to them, and getting to know them in the process then earned us the right to have that conversation that we wanted to have that was valuable to us. So it was paying it forward a little bit with this podcast that in turn just made people feel like they wanted to reciprocate. And that's a very healthy exchange of value.
Yeah, yeah. I think that that's usually the problem that I see with uh, a lot of companies' sales approach these days is just they're trying to pitch too fast, and you haven't earned the trust, you haven't earned the respect, the relationship yet. So it just falls on deaf ears. I know that one of your biggest questions before we started the pilot is whether your ideal clients would actually feel compelled to join a podcast and see this as a valuable offer. Like, did this also change your view of the offer and whether it was compelling enough?
I think the offer was compelling to the folks we targeted. Uh, in retrospect, I probably would have narrowed that target a little bit more because we cast a broad net at first because we wanted to see how this would work. And so we targeted people that were kind of on the operational level, then the mid level, then a few senior executive level. And I think in retrospect, I would target only the people who I know have budget authority to spend the level of investment they would need to buy our product. Because where we ended up is a lot of folks that are going to be influential are going to help us get to the end sale, but it's going to take another step or two because they don't have personal budget authority to enter into an agreement with us.
Definitely. And I know that as we started, we learned more and more the ideal fit for these conversations throughout the process, throughout learning from the first few. But beyond the actual recordings themselves, let's talk about what was useful commercially about these conversations. Like, did you learn more about the types of buyer language that your prospects use, or gain any insight into the accounts that you'd like to go after, or what would work as far as follow up angles, or or those influencer stakeholder paths?
Yeah, I think we learned a lot in the process, and I will credit some of your execution support where you put together the briefing for us of this is the person, this is their roles, these are the company initiatives, and a suggested list of questions and thought starters. That was super helpful, and I ultimately augmented that with my own thoughts as I got a few reps under my belt and got more comfortable with the process. But what we learned from the people we spoke with was a couple of things. One, the transactional stuff you want to learn. What are their pain points? What systems are they using? What's working? What's not? And the things that you normally want to go through in the due diligence of a selling process. But the other important thing was just getting a sense for the people and who they were and how they communicated, and having that chance to build rapport in a setting where your customer is feeling like you're doing them a favor. Because I was moderating a discussion, I was pointing the discussion into areas where the customer wanted to speak about that, where they wanted to be seen as an authority, and that made them feel really good about the relationship, and it gave me the credibility again to follow up and just have a conversation with them, because now, we're not only business associates, we're sort of friends because we just had this half an hour kind of intimate discussion. That was a discussion that they wanted to have and that they found gratifying.
Yeah, yeah. I think again, it's sometimes hard, especially because I know that R4 you guys deal with really long sales cycles, right? So it's sometimes hard to evaluate whether you're actually getting the right direction or not. And I know that that's something that we were learning throughout is really okay. Like, how can we evaluate this and the success of this motion? Um, I know that one of the conversations was significantly more productive because we were, speaking to the right person with the right buying power,
Yep.
and the right seniority,
Yep.
without naming anything too sensitive. This guy was, a COO in a major retailer. What made that conversation different than the other ones?
It's funny. Everybody talks about the things that are important with them, but because this person was the COO and had a direct line to the CEO and chairman, everything he spoke about was really applicable to the things we wanted to do. And when he spoke about a problem, he also basically was saying, I have a mandate to solve this personally. And it just amplified the importance of every piece of the conversation, honestly. And that was one of the ones that progressed quite well because we got to the senior stakeholder on that first shot, understood that stakeholder's needs and skepticisms. This is a person who said it was really funny because he said it in the middle of the discussion. Hey, I'm from New Jersey. What do you guys want out of this? And it was very blunt and wanted to understand what the value equation was, but also playing ball with it because he understood the value was two way and very explicitly agreed to help us out in return.
Yeah, yeah, and I enjoyed that one. I remember looking back specifically because that was the first we had a few technical difficulties and it almost didn't happen multiple times. We had to reschedule it, but we finally made it happen. And I'm so happy because that one turned out to be the biggest success. And really, be a great example of exactly what happens when you get the right person in the room. And also when you're clear and direct about this. I think one of the biggest hesitations people have about the strategies that you come in for a podcast, you leave being sold to. So how did you kind of feel about that aspect of this, and how did we like address as we progress the conversations?
Yeah, that was definitely an evolution in our thinking. Is we were overly timid about just being transparent about what we got out of the conversation. I remember the first couple of conversations, we didn't even broach the subject of having a meeting with them until the second conversation. And by the end of our series, we were starting out the expectation setting right at the very beginning of the meeting saying, you're going to we're going to have a great discussion. You're going to tell us things about your business, some of which we'll be able to help you with. And we will ask about talking to you to help you with those issues after the podcast. And people were fine with that. They were perfectly willing to have that trade off. And I think that, and again, kind of going back to the idea of this podcast helps you understand the people, they're people as persons and individuals, not just folks in an org structure. We really got to get comfortable with that one very senior gentleman, just about how his no nonsense demeanor and the kinds of things that were interesting to him. He literally started just asking us questions like, I'm going to such and such a geography. Do you guys know any great locations there that I should visit? Completely off the cuff requests for our perspective once we had built that trust.
Yeah, I mean that's super pleasing for me to hear. That just again, I think being direct, being honest, and also giving value up front is really what people care about. People appreciate the honesty. They just don't like that slimy feeling of like, oh, I came for one thing and then you're completely giving me a different
Exactly.
experience.
Exactly.
Right? If you're setting expectations right, I think that's what one of the main things that we learn. Let's talk about how this compares to events. I know that that's one of the things you came into. I know that you came back to R4 as the chief revenue officer, and you wanted to really, change things around. Right? We kind of discussed before things weren't working, and one of the other things that began working during the time that we've been working together that I noticed is events. How do you see this strategy complementing the event strategy rather than just replacing it?
I think it's all about having a good mix when you're approaching the marketplace. And just the practice that we had in running these podcasts is helpful to us in events, but also at events where we can talk to our engagement with other fellow industry leaders for people that are attending those events. And I've not gone the I've not gone to the step of suggesting my own podcasts to people, but clearly one kind of reinforces the other. What you learn in one channel reinforces what you do in another.
Definitely. And what value do you see that the podcast strategy has specifically, maybe in the content or thought leadership regard, or even just in that upfront offer that events doesn't really answer?
Think events. If you want to talk about people having their guard up, it's even 10 times that at events. So if you send an email to them or call them when they're at their desk, their guard's up. When they're walking a trade show floor, their guard's up way more than that. So I think the contrast is even more stark when you think about spending money on an event versus spending money on a podcast to try to drive demand. The podcast is so effective at dropping that guard down, so you can have a good conversation with your prospects. That you just don't get that at a trade show.
Yeah. Yeah. I think again, because it doesn't feel like a sales conversation. That's really why I feel like it has worked for us and it's working for you guys and for our other clients is because people kind of just are more open to share, right? And it feels like more of a conversation rather than a sales pitch.
Exactly right.
Um, yeah, just to wrap things up here, if you're stepping back into your shoes and speaking to maybe somebody who's considering podcast led outbound, but is still kind of on the fence, what would you share with them to kind of like help them make a decision whether this is actually worth it and what you got out of this experience?
So I would 100% endorse people trying this. You have to try something before you know if it works, quite honestly. And that was one of the things that was appealing to us is you created a commercial model that allowed us to try it with in a way that wasn't too incredibly risky for us. It was an uh, acceptably smaller budget, so we didn't feel like we were risking way too much. We weren't over allocating and placing too heavy of a bet. But I think in addition to the sales cycles you'll start by running this, whether it's successful for a company or not, they've started sales cycles and they've got relationships that they can then farm and grow over time. But they'll learn a ton about how they can articulate themselves well, the conversation points that are appealing to their customers, the conversation points that aren't, because there's nothing like being immersed in this 20-30 minute podcast and letting your customers talk about the things that are important to them to really understand what will resonate and what won't, beyond the podcast channel to all the other demand gen activities you may be engaged in.
Yeah. Yeah, I think again, sometimes that's hard to articulate just how beneficial that is. But I can say for myself also, just speaking to so many guests, that over time I just really learn exactly what it hones all of our marketing, because we get to understand exactly what what creates value and what's interesting for our prospects, what pain points they have, what they care about, and we consistently use that feedback in all of our marketing. So that's another good point. But yeah, Alan, thank you so much for coming on today and sharing your experience. Um, for anyone who, I don't know, maybe wants to connect with you personally, where's the best place for them to connect with you if they have any ideas or want to collaborate with what R4 is doing?
Happy to chat with anybody. Easiest way is just send me an email. That's A as in Apple, F as in Frank, LOHR at r4.ai.
Perfect. Again, thank you, Alan, and thank you for anyone who's watching. Yeah, see you in the next one, guys.